Hi everyone, and welcome back to my channel. My name is Mikal and I'm a photographer and the creator of the HABESHA Project. HABESHA is indisputably a community-oriented term. It's similar to Arab, Latinx, Desi, and it is used colloquially to describe the Eritrean and Ethiopian community. However, its meaning varies widely among individuals and communities, with some opting not to use the word due to a preference for their ethnic or their national identity. So I asked over 20 Eritreans and Ethiopians, do you identify as Habesha? Who is Habesha? For 7 weeks, I am breaking down 14 different audio interviews, all available at full length here on YouTube. In each video, I will be covering 2 episodes of these conversations. They're rich, they're layered, and they show how a single word can carry so much history, tension, and love. If you want to listen to the full interviews or check out the virtual exhibit, you can do so at HABESHAproject.com. And if you would like to see my written analysis that accompanies these videos, you can check those out on Substack. Everything will be linked in the description below. I also want to take a moment to hold solidarity with Sudan. They are facing the world's largest humanitarian crisis. Tens of thousands are dead and 12 million people are displaced. I wrote a personal essay as part of this virtual exhibit called Where the Jebena Crosses Borders. Eritrea and Ethiopia's history is inextricably linked with Sudan as our neighbor. I'll be leaving a link below that explains more about the current crisis in El Fasher, as well as organizations to donate to. Despite the genocide that the people of Darfur are facing, there are still people on the ground who are offering their time and efforts to provide much needed services to the people fleeing their homes. I urge everyone to educate themselves on what's happening in Sudan, and if anything, donate at least $5, the amount you would spend on your daily coffee, to support these efforts. And with that, let's get into this week's video. Our 5th participant is Ethiopian, born in Virginia and raised in North Carolina. She shares early on in this conversation that she never fully understood what the word Habesha meant, but she always likened it to Latinx as an umbrella term for both Eritreans and Ethiopians. This was especially prevalent for her because in her town in North Carolina, it was a mixed immigrant community, and her grocer was actually Eritrean, so her community was very mixed. However, she goes on to share that there were fractures in her community, and although she didn't fully understand them, they were deeply felt. Due to her church community separating, she ended up herself separated from kids that she originally was sharing her childhood with. And to this, she asks, for what? As these 2 groups are in the diaspora, she didn't understand why Eritreans and Ethiopians wouldn't want to be together. In the same breath, she's able to understand her privilege and why she wouldn't be exposed to these conflicts, because ultimately her family was not always affected. Unfortunately, her family has been affected in recent years, and she cites this as a reason why her family has yet to visit Ethiopia. She visited in her childhood, but she's still looking for the right time to visit now. She goes on to share that she ultimately feels like she extracted from Ethiopia in a way that the diaspora can only do when we romanticize home. And this is something that we see with much of the African diaspora, the way that we romanticize the continent, as people our age, from our backgrounds, are on the ground living the reality of the situations back home. She shares that although she's already faced the challenges that come with being a U.S. American, she hadn't fully faced the challenges of what comes with the Ethiopian identity in grappling with her immense pride, but also understanding the weight of her history. She herself is working on a project focused on the Habesha, or the Eritrean and Ethiopian community. And she talks about how she originally named this project HABESHAnet, or the essence of Habesha. And although the word Habesha is used colloquially among the young Eritreans and Ethiopians in New York City, we have used it amongst each other. It was significant enough of a conversation to change the name of her project from HABESHAnet to Roots. I found it interesting that she herself had never met anyone who did not identify with the word Habesha. And I felt like this highlighted something significant, that for some Ethiopians, they may understand that people do not identify with this word, but for them, it's often theoretical or conceptual, versus with many Eritreans, it's the experience of lived exclusion. Speaking of exclusion, she goes on to talk about how she was not taught East African history growing up. Often, West Africa and Southern Africa are centered in Western conceptions of African history, but it wasn't until she studied abroad that she learned about the Arab slave trade. And she makes it clear that this is not just history. This is still happening today. She cites an article about how you can buy a person for $400. And I will link this article below. It was written in CNN, although many different outlets and many different human rights organizations have covered the ongoing slave trade, not just in the Middle East, but also in Libya, on the African continent. I'm thankful for this participant for bringing this subject up. So I encourage everyone to listen to her audio to hear more about her experiences with this work. And in talking about identity, she talks about how context matters. When in Europe, she was assumed to be a refugee. When she was in Ghana, she was assumed to be Indian. And of course, the topic of anti-Blackness comes up in this context. She talks about how Ethiopians struggle to accept that they're Black, specifically in the U.S. context. If anyone's interested in hearing my thoughts on a matter, I actually wrote a personal essay called Double Roasted, which you can find on HABESHAProject.com. Like our first two participants raised in the United States, this participant affirms that she's Black, and when the police pull her over, she's not going to be asked if she's Ethiopian or not. Unfortunately, in the world that we live in, the identity that stands out predominantly amongst everyone, regardless of who you are, will always be your skin tone. And this is a reality that she's come to accept. She doesn't like boxes, but she acknowledges that the word Habesha can be unifying, especially when isolated in an environment outside of one's homeland. When you're one of the only people that looks like you, finding someone from your same culture can be a great source of comfort. She ends with something that I think encapsulates this project perfectly. It's important to diversify stories and to complicate the narrative. The point isn't for everyone to agree. It's for the dialogue to begin. Our sixth participant was 38 at the time of this interview. He was born and raised in New York, and he identifies strictly as Eritrean. He's clear from the start. He identifies just as Eritrean, not as Tigrinya, the dominant ethnic group of Eritrea. Because Eritrea fought for 30 years for independence from Ethiopia, the national identity often takes precedence, versus in Ethiopia, where they have ethnic federalism as the government structure, ethnicity tends to be a larger point of conflict. Like participant 5, he compares the word to Latinx or Arab, but he goes on to say that he really has a distaste for this word because he learned that it meant half caste, meaning that we are of mixed heritage, and this word was used in a derogatory way to refer to us as an exonym or by people outside of our community. This also relates to participant 3, who was born in Eritrea and consequently had more exposure to the Middle East, and he also cited the word Habesh, which is what they use in both Sudan and the Arab world, as, again, a derogatory term for people from our region. Although, like most participants, he's not 100% certain of the word's origins, he knows for sure that this word originated in southern Arabia, and he recalls when Facebook just began in 2006, seeing arguments about these conversations online. I'm just going to take a quick note here and flag that this is 20 years of the same conversations, and it's these conversations that informed my work and my desire to open up new forms of dialogue. He admits it's easy to use the word, even if you know it's problematic. He even cites in the interview that we are both Eritrean and we're both part of the HABESHA Google group, in which people in New York tend to connect or share events with one another. However, he makes a point that also feels central to this project. You can represent people from these countries without using a word that could potentially misidentify them. The goal is to use language that respects our differences. He goes on to discuss something that our participant in episode 3 discussed, how Eritrean and Ethiopian culture is often exceptionalized and juxtaposed against other regions of Africa due to our ancient ties to Christianity. But this participant notes that we also have a deep history with Islam, and that the Tigray people, an Eritrean ethnic group, are also considered Habesha, despite the fact that they're Muslim. Unfortunately, there isn't a Tigray participant in this project, so we weren't able to get that perspective. But if anyone would like me to do a deep dive into how I chose my participants, how I went about contacting people, let me know, and I'm happy to make that video as well. But in many ways, whether it's the way that our history is separated from other African regions, or in the way that Eritreans and Ethiopians are constantly told how beautiful we are, we're exceptionalized. And this, in and of itself, is a form of anti-Blackness. I'm thankful for this participant for naming how anti-Black propaganda works by explicitly elevating one group over another. Exemplifying the anti-Blackness in our community, he shares a story that was shared a bit tongue-in-cheek by his family over dinner. As the story goes, God was baking cookies, and when he puts them in the oven, they come out burned. And these are African people. He puts in another batch. He puts them in for too little time. They come out as European people. And then he puts in the final batch, and they come out just right, and those are Habesha people. And he also believes the word Habesha was used in this context. Clearly, his family did not make up this story, so please let me know in the comments if you have heard this story or a variation of it. In this same vein, he talks about when he was growing up, this was during the time of the famine in Ethiopia. So he often heard things like Starvin' Marvin or narratives related to poverty when it came to Africa. This has shifted significantly, especially with the fetishization of East African women. However, he notes that this fetishization is just the other side of the same anti-Blackness coin. He says that although Eritrean identities and Black identities are distinct and they sometimes overlap, that he is both at all times. Ultimately, his upbringing and his heritage allows him to hold that complexity in his own identity. He ends on a note that ties everything all together. For him, not identifying as Habesha is less about nationalism and more about recognizing that not every Eritrean is Habesha. The term does not capture the diversity of his country, and he does not see the purpose of using a term that excludes people that it's meant to represent. So this week gave us two perspectives that ask us to sit in discomfort. The first perspective talking about the importance of complicating the narrative, and the second perspective reminding us that you can bring people together while at the same time respecting what makes them unique and distinct. Both are grappling with the same tension. How can you recognize and honor shared culture while not flattening narratives or erasing people's identities? Next week, we'll be getting into episodes 7 and 8. In the meantime, explore the HABESHA Project at habeshaproject.com, and do not forget to fill out the Google form linked in the description below. Let me know, would you be interested in buying prints in 2026? If so, the Google form is quick and it allows me to gauge interest. Let me know what y'all think in the comments. Did anything resonate? Was there anything that challenged you? Is there anything that you're learning? Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you next week.